Hello again. Welcome to part 3 of my Sigma comparator repair. At the end of the last video, I was about to replace the phos-bronze band back in its place, but I forgot to check the 3 holes for broken edges and burrs. So the first thing we will do is look at these under the microscope. I could use the SIP, but I will instead introduce the Becks microscope, another piece of classic English equipment. Yes, I just want to give a shout out to Swarthy1 from the comments section in my very first video that I made called A Brief Introduction to some of my equipment I have. We're talking about Becks microscopes, and if you are watching this video, I just want to let you know this is my Becks binocular microscope right here. So this microscope has been very useful, especially in aiding me in the project that I'm doing right now. And both my father and I, we have a collection of these Becks microscopes. Yes, that's not good enough. There's still fractures and broken edges. Needs further de-burring. So I'm just examining the holes of the phos-bronze band through my Becks London Binocular microscope. So we're going to make sure that I clean the holes. So there's a few very, very tiny burrs. So I just have to clean up the burrs. It's got to be it's not too bad, but I'm just going to clean them up, make sure there's no burrs at all, which could potentially lead to fractures. And then once under pressure inside the instrument, inside the Sigma, it could potentially rip. Yeah, what I do is I use a bit of very fine abrasive paper, and I twist it up into a small little bit and just run it very gently and carefully into the holes, into each hole of the band, and just spin it inside there very carefully to clean all this up. Zoom in. Yeah, it definitely needs polishing. Oh, not very nice. Yep, need to polish it. We'll do that, and then we will fit it back into the Sigma comparator. Alright, that's the other hole. So yeah, I'm just using an 800 grit aluminium oxide abrasive paper, twist it up, and I'm just running it through very carefully inside each of the holes of the band. It's been very, very delicate just to clean up those burrs. That's it. That's much better. Can you see that? That's the hole edges. That's the edge of the hole. And that's what it looks like down through the scope of the sip. Okay, so now I'm going to fit the phos-bronze band that we've just made onto the drum of the spindle. So this is the so I'm going to fit this now back onto the drum here with its screw and washer. So now I'm going to fit the spindle back in. Inside the little bearing in here, and also inside there, as well as very, very small tiny little ball bearings. I'm going to make sure they don't come out. That's to allow for the spindle to spin in its two bearings. Anyway, I'm going to assemble this now. So now I'm just going to wind the screw around the back outwards to allow the spike to come down and pivot on the sapphire crystal bearing block. And the reason why, because at the moment, is I've raised it up so the knife edge is not actually on the sapphire crystal bearing block, on the cross hinge. There you go. Yeah, just made a slight adjustment to the tension on the spindle. So I wanted to just try and keep it exactly to how I had it before. So now I've got to fit the magnet back in. I forgot to mention, when I actually stripped this down, I took a gap clearance between the end of the horseshoe magnet and the aluminium rotating disc. So the gap clearance that I measured between the end of the horseshoe magnet and the aluminium rotary disc, using a set of feeler gauges, measured 0.35 millimeters. With this one in particular, anyway, when I stripped it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain exactly what was there. Keep it. I'm going to keep it to the original. I'm going to set the gap clearance as it was when I took this apart, and that was 0.35 millimeters. I'm assuming that's the original gap clearance set. So it measured 0.35, and that's what I'm going to set it to. I'm going to set it back to as it was before I took it apart. Of course, if it starts to bind, as in preventing the needle from moving nicely, then what I'll do is I'll just try and increase the clearance a little bit more. Or if there's not enough dampening motion, then I will decrease the gap clearance. But I'll see how it goes. So that's now set. So these guards are here just to prevent the needle from falling beyond its scale. I'm not going to calibrate this. As I said in my previous video, you adjust the knife edge here on the sapphire bearing block. Of course, with a set of known calibrated size gauge blocks, and then you set your scale as per your gauge block sizes, your known calibrated gauge block sizes. All I'm going to do is just have a quick look just to see where it is and if it's approximately there on the scale. But I will calibrate this properly once I've sorted the anvil. But all I'm going to do is just have a look and just see where it is. I haven't tampered anything with the knife edge screws, because by right it's obviously been set by the manufacturer back in the day. Now, whether it's been tampered since, I don't know, because obviously I received this as a broken unit, but we will see. If I have to tune it, then this is where I would make the adjustment. But all I want to do is just see how it works. If it's there, I'm going to run the 2 sets of gauge blocks just to see where it is on the scale. But I'm not going to do any proper calibration with this right now, because I need to do the anvils. I need to get the anvils lapped and just give a general check over on the mechanism as well. And only then I'll tune it up and do a full proper test. Anyway, I'm just going to run 2 gauge block sizes. This gauge block should be up to the should be -6, -0.06. This one should be, which it is. And the next one should be up to +3. Which it is. +3. The next one should be -6. Which it is. Well, that's okay. Still need to tune it up. Just a quick size. It's just a quick check. But until I've done the anvil and checked out the rest, that's when I'll tune it up and calibrate it. So this here is the sapphire crystal bearing block. And that's the knife edge that's pivoting on it. And the sapphire crystal bearing block is on this cross hinge, as I mentioned in my part 1 of the Sigma comparator videos. And you can adjust these screws for calibration, but by right it's been preset by the manufacturer. But whether it's been tampered with since then, I don't know. But so far, on just a quick basic test, it seems alright. So we'll have a look once the anvil is lapped and done. This whole thing here also pivots on the back there. As you can see, this actually rolls. So by adjusting these two screws or the knife edge, that's where you will set your pivot point for adjustment. Of course, when you do that, you always have the whole plunger lifted up. Now, I tend to have it lifted up by, there's a little screw on the top here, this screw right here, which I screw in, and it lifts the whole plunger up. So it keeps the knife edge off the sapphire bearing crystal block for when you're making your adjustments. Then always make sure that this screw, before operation, always make sure this screw is wound fully out, because the cone, this cone end of the screw will actually go inside this hole and pushes the plunger up, therefore keeping the knife edge off the sapphire crystal bearing block. But when it's in use, you want that screw, this screw, to be wound fully out so that the knife edge then sits and pivots on the sapphire crystal bearing block. These are the flexure springs I mentioned with the thimble for zeroing out your reading. This only works when you've got applied load on the plunger. Alright, let me get the cover back on. I'm not going to tighten this bottom half flange up, because I'm going to undo it again anyway later for tuning in, because now I'm going to go to the next stage, and that is to lap the anvils. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, do hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, that'll be most appreciated. And by all means do leave a comment. And I hope to see you in next week's video, which will be part 4, where we will be doing some scraping and lapping. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.